The day I moved in, my husband's brother scoffed. This was supposed to be my house, not yours. My husband shrugged and said, he's just upset. Let him be. I smirked and handed his brother a paper. His face went pale as he read the one thing that made him powerless. Moving day should have been exciting. I had spent years dreaming of owning a home, and now, here we were, me, my husband Mark, and a moving truck packed with everything we owned. The house was beautiful, a colonial-style home in Nashville, Tennessee, passed down through Mark's family for generations. But the moment we pulled into the driveway, I felt it. A tension so thick it could choke you. Standing on the porch, arms crossed, was Paul, Mark's older brother. Paul wasn't just waiting. He was lurking. His face was tight, jaw clenched, eyes burning into mine like I was an intruder. This was supposed to be my house, he spat. Mark sighed, rubbing his temples. He's just upset. Let him be. I didn't let it slide. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folded document. No words, no smug grin, just a firm hand as I placed it in his. Paul snatched it, his fingers tightening around the edges. I watched his expression shift. Confusion. Then realization. Then, finally, panic. You can't do this, he stammered. This isn't possible. But it was. And he was the reason why. How we got here. Paul had always been the favorite. The golden child. The one their parents defended, excused, and bailed out whenever he got himself into trouble, which was often. Mark, on the other hand? The responsible one. The afterthought. The one expected to understand when Paul got more attention, more support, more second chances. Their parents had never made a will, but there was an agreement. The house would go to whoever paid off the mortgage and taxes first. Paul assumed this meant the house was his by default. After all, Mark never had money, right? So Paul moved in. Rent-free. No mortgage payments. No taxes. Just years of living like a king in a house he assumed would always be his. Except he made one mistake. He never read the fine print. While Paul was blowing through his money, Mark and I were quietly buying him out. We paid down his half of the mortgage. We covered his share of the taxes. We did this for years, slowly and carefully, while Paul partied, racked up debt, and ignored every warning letter the bank sent. Then, the final nail in the coffin. Paul missed too many property tax payments. Legally, his ownership share? Gone. And Mark? The sole owner. Paul had no idea. Not until that moment on that porch, with that paper in his hand. His breathing went shallow. His face turned pale. You tricked me, he hissed. I shrugged. You tricked yourself. Mark looked away, clearly uncomfortable. But me? I was just getting started. Paul stood frozen, gripping the paper like it had personally insulted him. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Then, his face twisted. His breathing went loud and sharp, and before I could take a step back, he tore the paper in half. You think this means anything? He shouted, his voice cracking. You think you can just walk in here and take what's mine? Mark stiffened but didn't say anything. I didn't either. I just watched as Paul lost it. His hands shook as he ran them through his hair, pacing back and forth on the porch. He kept glancing at the front door like he wanted to run inside and lock us out. And I swear to God, for a second, I thought he might. Then, he stopped pacing. His eyes snapped to Mark. You can't do this to me, he pleaded, his voice suddenly small. I have nowhere else to go. That was a lie. Paul had plenty of places to go. He just didn't want to. Because here's the thing, Paul had no job, no savings, and a trail of burned bridges behind him. He had pissed off every friend, every ex, and even his own parents. The only reason he was still living here was because he thought he had all the time in the world. But time was up. And he knew it. Paul wasn't done. Not by a long shot. You don't get it, he said, stepping closer. If you kick me out, I'll have no choice but to tell Mom and Dad. Mark flinched, but I didn't. Go ahead, I said, crossing my arms. Tell them the truth. That you let this house fall apart while we worked our asses off to save it. Paul's face darkened. They'll never forgive you. I let out a short laugh. Forgive us for following the rules? For keeping the house instead of letting it go into foreclosure. They'll take my side, he spat. Mark finally spoke. Then let them. That hit Paul harder than the papers ever could. His mouth opened, then shut. Mark had never stood up to him before. And Paul didn't know how to handle it. The next few days were hell. Paul refused to leave. He dragged his feet, making excuses, talking about needing just a little more time to figure things out. Mark, always the peacemaker, agreed to give him 1 extra week. I knew it was a mistake. And I was right. Because Paul wasn't packing up his things. He was destroying the house. It started small, little things. Scratched floors, dented walls, mysteriously clogged sinks. Then it got worse. One morning, I walked into the living room and smelled something foul. Paul had taken raw meat and stuffed it inside the air vents. I nearly gagged. When I confronted him, he just grinned. "Oh no," he said, faking concern. "Looks like the house has a rat problem." I clenched my fists. "You need to leave. Now." He smirked. "Or what?" Mark came up behind me, his face tense. "Or we call the cops." Paul's smirk dropped. He knew we weren't bluffing anymore. But instead of backing down, he got worse. That night, we heard loud crashes from upstairs. Running footsteps. A door slamming. By the time we made it up there, Paul was gone. And so was the bathroom sink. Not just broken, ripped out of the wall. We stood there, speechless. Then Mark exhaled and pulled out his phone. "That's it," he muttered. "I'm calling a lawyer." Paul had no idea what was coming for him. Mark was on the phone with our lawyer while I stood in the wrecked bathroom, staring at the exposed pipes where the sink used to be. I wasn't shocked. Angry? Yes. Tired? Definitely. But surprised? No. Paul had always been destructive when things didn't go his way. But this? This was calculated. And something about it felt off. Ripping a sink out of the wall wasn't just petty revenge, it was desperate. Something was wrong. I walked down the hall, stepping carefully around bits of drywall and broken glass. Paul had left behind a mess, but his room, the one he had claimed as his for years, it was spotless. The bed was made. The closet was empty. Even the nightstand, which usually had beer bottles and loose change on it, was completely cleared out. It wasn't just empty. It was scrubbed clean. That's when I noticed it. A small, metal key, half hidden under the carpet. I bent down and pulled the key free. It was tiny, the kind used for a lockbox or a small safe. Mark walked in, phone still in his hand. "The lawyer says we can file for a formal eviction." I held up the key. "I think I found something." Mark blinked. "Where?" "Under the carpet," I said, flipping it over in my hand. "It looks like a safe key." Mark exhaled. "You think he hid something?" I shrugged. It wouldn't be the first time. Paul had a history of sketchy behavior. Money disappearing. Suspicious business deals. Random, unexplainable purchases. But this? This was the first time we had actual evidence that he was hiding something. We searched the room. The closet. Under the bed. Behind the dresser. Nothing. Then Mark pulled back the bottom drawer of the nightstand, reached inside, and his fingers hit something solid. A small, black lockbox. My pulse sped up. We looked at each other. Then Mark slid the key into the lock and turned it. Click. Inside, there were 3 things. 1. A thick stack of cash. All in $100 bills. 2. A pile of legal documents, bound together with a rubber band. 3. A small USB drive. I grabbed the documents first. Mark took the USB. "What the hell is this?" I muttered, flipping through the papers. Mark frowned at the flash drive. Only one way to find out. We headed downstairs to Mark's laptop. While he plugged in the USB, I scanned the documents. Then my stomach dropped. They were fake property transfer forms. Signed in our names. Except we had never signed them. Mark looked up at me. "What is it?" I turned the papers around so he could see. Paul was trying to forge the deed. Mark's face went slack. "Are you serious?" I tapped the obviously fake signatures at the bottom of the page. He was trying to transfer the house to himself. Mark ran a hand over his face. "That bastard." Then he clicked on a file from the USB. And the screen filled with emails. The emails told us everything. Paul had been trying to sell the house behind our backs. The messages were between him and a real estate agent, someone shady, willing to turn a blind eye to legal paperwork. Paul had promised he'd have full ownership soon. He was this close to finalizing a deal. And the buyer? A developer looking to tear the house down and build apartments. My blood ran cold. He wasn't just trying to steal from us. He was trying to erase everything. This house wasn't just some random property. It had been in Mark's family for decades. It was supposed to be ours, our future, our home. And Paul had planned to take it, sell it, and walk away with hundreds of thousands of dollars. Without us ever knowing. Mark's hands curled into fists. He knew. He knew he was losing the house, so he tried to forge his way back into it. I gritted my teeth. And when that didn't work, he trashed it out of spite. We sat in silence for a long moment, staring at the proof. Then Mark exhaled, slow and steady. "We're done playing nice," he said. And I knew, from the way his voice hardened, Paul had no idea what was coming next. Mark slammed the laptop shut, breathing hard. His hands were shaking not with fear, but with rage. "We need to call the police," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Mark shook his head. "Not yet. I want to hear what he has to say first." I frowned. "You really think he's going to admit to any of this?" Mark didn't answer. He just grabbed the lockbox, the fake documents, and the USB and walked straight for the door. Paul wasn't home. So we waited. And when he finally came back, he walked in like he owned the place, like nothing had changed. He barely glanced at us before tossing his keys onto the kitchen counter. "Hope you didn't touch my stuff," he muttered. Mark didn't waste time. He grabbed the stack of fake documents and slammed them onto the table. Paul flinched. His eyes flicked to the papers, then to Mark, then to me. What is this?" he asked, his voice forced and casual. "You tell me," Mark said, his voice ice cold. "Because it looks like you were trying to steal the house." Paul laughed. A short, fake laugh. "Wow, you really think I'd do that?" I stepped forward, my anger boiling over. "We found your emails, Paul. We saw everything. The fake signatures. The sale you were trying to make behind our backs." I grabbed the USB from Mark and held it up. "You're caught. Just admit it." Paul's face twitched just for a second. Then he scoffed and shook his head. "This is insane. You guys are paranoid." Mark didn't budge. "Then explain the fake deed transfer." Paul's mouth opened, but no words came out. We had him. And he knew it. For a moment, the room was silent. Then, like a switch flipped, Paul's entire body tensed. He grabbed the papers, ripping them in half, just like he had with the ownership documents. "You think you're better than me?" he snarled, voice rising. "You think you deserve this house?" I took a step back. His eyes were wild, his face red with rage. "I gave my life to this house," he yelled, slamming his fist onto the counter. "I lived here. I took care of it. And what did you do? You just, what? Bought it behind my back? Stole it from me." Mark exhaled, slow and controlled. "You didn't take care of anything, Paul. You didn't pay the taxes. You didn't fix anything. You didn't even clean. You just let it rot, assuming you'd never have to deal with the consequences." Paul's nostrils flared. "You were always jealous of me. Always looking for a way to screw me over." I laughed, actually laughed. Because this was insane. "Jealous." I repeated. "Paul, you had every opportunity. Your parents bailed you out a dozen times. You had this house handed to you. And you still lost it." Paul's face twisted. "You don't know what it's like," he spat. "You don't get it." Mom and Dad aren't here," Mark interrupted. "And even if they were, they wouldn't be able to save you this time." Paul froze. For the first time, his confidence cracked. Because he knew it was true. No more handouts. No more second chances. No more excuses. This was the end. Paul's breathing was heavy, his face still twisted in rage. But something had changed. He was scared now. Because there was nothing left to argue. Nothing left to manipulate. He was out of moves. His head jerked toward the front door, like he was about to storm out. But then, suddenly, he ran upstairs. Mark and I exchanged a look. "What the hell is he doing?" I whispered. Then we heard it. The sound of drawers slamming. A suitcase unzipping. Paul wasn't just leaving. He was trying to take something with him. I bolted up the stairs, Mark close behind. By the time we reached Paul's room, he had a duffel bag in his hands. And I knew, just knew, that whatever was inside it wasn't his. Mark blocked the doorway. Paul's grip tightened on the bag. "Move." Mark crossed his arms. "Not until you show us what's inside." Paul hesitated. Then, in one sudden motion, he shoved past Mark, trying to make a run for it. Mark grabbed him before he could make it down the stairs. The two of them stumbled, knocking over a lamp, and Paul went down hard. The bag spilled open. And that's when I saw it. Stacks of cash. Family jewelry. Silverware from the kitchen. Even our passports. I stared at the mess on the floor, my brain struggling to catch up. Paul wasn't just running. He was trying to rob us on the way out. Paul pushed himself up, his hands shaking. This isn't what it looks like," he stammered. Mark's face was blank. Just blank. "No, Paul," he said quietly. "This is exactly what it looks like." Paul opened his mouth to argue. But then, headlights flashed outside. The cops had arrived. I had called them the second we found the fake deed. And Paul finally knew it was over. Paul was arrested for attempted fraud, vandalism, and theft. We pressed every charge we could. Mark's parents, who had spent years making excuses for Paul, were horrified. Not at us, but at him. Because the truth was finally out. Paul had been lying, stealing, and manipulating everyone for years. And now? He had finally lost. We changed the locks. Got the house fixed. Moved in for real. And Paul? He never came back. He spent 6 months in jail, then disappeared somewhere out west. Last I heard, he was couch surfing, still blaming everyone but himself. And honestly, that was the best revenge of all. Because for the first time in his life, Paul had to face the one thing he had spent years running from. The consequences.